It's traditionally the largest gathering on women's rights in the world. In a 2-week virtual setting that seeks to find consensus on an agreed roadmap to advance the greater role of women in public life, as well as the elimination of violence against women and girls.
We meet for a second time in the context of the pandemic, which is having a devastating impact on women and girls. COVID-19 is a crisis with a woman's face. The fallout has shown how deeply gender inequality remains embedded in the world's political, social, and economic systems. Those disparities have themselves exacerbated the damage, and we have all paid the price.
The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated existing inequalities, from increased reports of domestic violence, unpaid care responsibilities, rates of child marriage, and millions of women plunged into extreme poverty as they lose their jobs in higher numbers than men.
The pandemic has also sparked a shadow epidemic of violence against women worldwide, both online and offline. Every month, the toll rises, from sexual abuse to child marriage. The damage is incalculable and will resound down the decades into future generations. Now is the time to change course. Women's equal participation is the game changer we need.
As male-dominated power structures often result in the specific needs of women being overlooked, even as the world seeks to build back better from a pandemic that has disproportionately affected women and girls.
The premise of this year's priority theme is that it is not acceptable that institutions which are predominantly male-dominated decide on matters that affect women's lives and concerns the lives of all of humanity. In another governance situation, this would not be considered ethical for stakeholders to have little or no say in the decisions and policies that concern them. This session of the Commission gives us the tool to stimulate game-changing and much-needed concerted increase in women's representation through the agreed conclusion. And if we cannot achieve this in this year, where we face a challenge of our generation, I put it to you, Excellency, with respect, we will have to ask ourselves hard questions. What is the purpose of the Commission?
With the entire globe's developmental agenda under threat due to persistent inaction and a lack of political will.
Make no mistake, we will not achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development without guaranteeing women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence everywhere. Here in this room, we have the power to create a better world for all.
Gender equality described as a question of power, and the urgent need for its more equitable distribution will be key to a sustainable future for all humanity. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
And Sherwin joining us live from New York right now. Sherwin, thank you. So let's look at the theme, women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life. These are the dreams and aspirations of women set back again by COVID-19. Are we getting an idea of what could happen if there's no action on this?
Yeah, it's the stats and the data, Francis, that really tells the story, right? We only have 22 countries that have a woman head of state or a head of government out of 193 UN member states. 13 countries in the world, including South Africa, only 13 have gender equal cabinets. It'll take 130 years from today, Francis, till the year 2150 for us to reach equity at the highest levels of decision making and power at the rate that we are currently going at. The UN chief, Antonio Guterres, specifically addressing what these imbalances might mean for the future. Watch.
There's a need to address this imbalance. When women do not participate in decision-making, we only see the world through one angle. We create economic models that do not assess and measure the productive work that takes place at home. We create a digital fora with masculine bias, which is incorporated into their very code, and we see decisions taken that threatened efforts undertaken to ensure equitable access to health and reproductive services. And we expend billions of dollars on weapons that do not protect people better while neglecting violence endured by 1 out of every 3 women worldwide. There's a need to reshuffle the deck to shift this situation.
We also got some data from UN Women, Francis, and they point to 87 countries in the world that have COVID-19 task forces, essentially leadership roles in terms of this idea of building back better. And they find that of 87 countries, they mostly have men on these COVID-19 task forces or very, very few women. And in the context of COVID-19 disproportionately impacting women and girls, that in itself is a very telling statement.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And Sherwin, this is hard for me as a female member of the media, but I understand a number of speakers in the opening session pointing to the role of the media in perpetuating male-dominated structures and stereotypes and the need for more women in positions of power. Tell us more.
You know, we don't often do this, but perhaps it's time to give the SABC a pat on the back, Francis, right? Our editor-in-chief is a woman, our foreign editor is a woman, our economics editor is a woman, and we've had a long history of women in powerful editorial positions at the SABC. And whether our political editor is a male or not, he is impacted by having to share that space, the high table, essentially, with women at the trough, as it were. This is something that was raised by a number of speakers, among them the President of the General Assembly and the executive director of UN Women, looking specifically at why it's important for media to be more representative. Let's watch.
Part of the problem is that the majority of incidents go unreported due to stigma and outdated patriarchal norms, which are often perpetuated by the media. I ask journalists to end gender-based stereotyping and gendered media coverage of women in politics and public life. For no woman should feel the need to justify her presence or make herself smaller so that others are comfortable, or fear expressing herself, exercising her right to vote, or seeking election to public office. No woman should be under threat, underpaid, or underestimated.
The stereotypes that men are more capable leaders persist, and this we also need to change. Closely connected to this is the fact that women remain deeply underrepresented in news media, both as editors controlling content and perspectives as a subject matter. Excellencies, in this session, you can make your impatience known. You can propel progress, which will translate into greater benefits for women and girls.
Francis, the Secretary General, also speaking earlier, said that global news coverage shows that just 1 in 5 experts used in that coverage is a woman. One has to be intentional about these decisions. You've got to strike a gender balance in your story. It's something we've been taught here at the SABC as well, right?
Yeah, and really a lesson maybe that we can do even more. Showing critical to getting more women into positions of power is eliminating those impediments. You spoke about what's happening during the current pandemic. And then, of course, there's the issue of violence or threats of violence, be that in the home or in public life.
Yeah, so it begs the question, right, Francis, what does it mean to build back better? Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka again, watch.
The pandemic has been especially hard on women and girls. This is the most discriminatory crisis we've ever experienced. It has hit hardest those who are least able to cope. It has posed a direct challenge to our work as United Nations and the work of UN Women. The gains we have made in the past are at risk. Emerging from the crisis, we are facing more orphans and child-headed homes. Following school closures, there are 10 million more girls this decade anticipated to be at risk of child marriage, and girls permanently dropping out of school because of pregnancy, in the main from non-consensual sex.
So the point really is to have more women in the room, Francis, so that when policy prescriptions are determined, when your COVID task team is meeting to deal with the rise in child pregnancy as a result of this pandemic, to deal with the rise in child marriage as a result of this pandemic, having women and their ideas and policy prescriptions in the room will be key to how we build back better, Francis.
Definitely. Now, apparently some high-profile speakers are in the offing this week. They'll be making their first appearance at this commission. What do you know?
Well, the big one, the big draw card will be the national statement of the United States that is going to be delivered by the new and first female vice president of the United States, Kamala Harris. Of course, she's just been in office for just over 50 days, making her first appearance at the Commission on the Status of Women. And we understand that later this week, the Minister for Women, Youth and People Living with Disabilities, Maitenkoana Mashabane, is leading the South African delegation. She will deliver the country's statement later this week.
All right, thank you so much. Such an important issue. Thank you very much, Sherwin Bryce-Pease, live for us from New York.